All right, this is Aaron. I just was live on a different stream here in YouTube. I had to start over. I was having some feedback that my mic wasn't working. So I had my wife check it, make sure everything sounds good. So if it sounds good, we'll keep going. If not, I may have to do something else or choose a different mic, which I can do, but I'm not going to end the live because it's too much work in YouTube to start a live over again. And Facebook, you can kind of kick it back into gear. So I probably have some people looking for my other live, and maybe what I'll do is I'll just quickly copy this link and put it into Facebook so that if I have anybody looking for me, they know where to find me. So give me 1 second if you don't mind. Don't hesitate to also pop in and just say hi and let me know where you're watching from as I copy and paste this link, and hopefully that'll get a few more people here. Tell you what we can do. I think I can just edit this. I apologize for the changes, but we want to make sure that we get everybody in the right place, the right time. I think I can just copy and paste that link there, and we will save it. And I'll put 5 there. All right, I'm going to save that link, and we should be good to go. Hopefully, again, it sounds good. Let me know. We good over there? All right, so tonight we're going to continue working on the French Provincial China Cabinet that I worked on last Tuesday night on my Facebook page, Bowtie Treasures, and tonight we're doing the painting part. I've got several steps that we are going to be doing. Well, it's at different steps. The base is still 2 coats of Boss. The outside top part, I painted 2 coats of vintage shuck egg. The inside only has 1 coat. And I've got a couple pieces over there we may work on, but we need to add Stormy Seas is going to be what I'm going to use to help bring out some of the details and accentuate the design in this piece. I won't be able to do that on the bottom because it needs 2 coats of paint, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do, and I'll do that to the top, and when you see the finished results, you'll know how I did the bottom as well. There's a little bit of a resemblance here to what I like to call shading. But really what we're going to be doing is we're going to be putting paint in the crevices and corners of things, and then we're just going to wipe it off, and we're going to leave that color in there, but I'll probably have to use other brushes just to soften it here and there. So that's really what we're going to be working on. I'm going to do my best to walk you through the steps here in the next few minutes. So if you're interested in continuing to see more about this project, you're in the right place. And again, don't hesitate to say hi. Make sure everything's working for you, and sorry for any inconvenience tonight with the right link and all that, but I think we're doing pretty good now. I'm going to check one setting here real quick, make sure all my lights are good to go. All right, so like I said, this part here is 2 coats of Bonding Boss, and that's, well, where'd it go? And that container looks like this. And Bonding Boss really gives a good base coat, and it also helps protect from any kind of bleed through. I just really like to put that down, and again, 2 coats for that. The inside is going to not get any of this technique we're talking about, but it does need another coat. I'd like to maybe, if we have time, I'll do some painting and just talk about some of the key things that I try to do when I'm painting large surfaces. I could easily spray this whole thing, but part of me just really likes painting in my studio. I may spray the top coat though, because it's just going to be a lot easier. But I've been working on this at different stages, so it just really works better for me to paint it here in my studio. On large surfaces, you could use a roller. I'm just using a brush. I work pretty quick, so it's not too much of a problem. And I'll try and highlight that here, maybe even on the pieces that are right there. That's the door and 2 of the shelves. Further back, and I may show you how I paint a nice smooth finish on that. So if you're new to chalk painting, that may interest you, so stay tuned as we work on that together. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to move this around, and what I want to show you is how I am basically just going to bring out the details of this project. So we're going to move this down right there. There we go. Okay, so first thing you're going to need is a nice misting bottle. I say nice. It doesn't have to be nice. Mine's seen a lot. It's got paint all over it. But you can get a squirt one. This is a Dixie Belle misting bottle. I believe they still sell on the website, or they used to. But this one has more of a continuous spray. But you need something in order to do this technique. You're going to want to have a misting bottle because I need it to be wet so that when I apply it, I can wipe it off quickly. So that's really the key. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Stormy Seas is really nice because it is in the same family as Vintage Duck Egg. It's just a lot darker. Now, I've got a lot of brushes here I can choose from. And I really just need to pick one that's going to put just the right amount of paint down. Dixie Belle's got some artist brushes. It's got one that's kind of a chisel. It's got a flat one. Those would be good choices depending on the size of the space. You can use the 1-inch, which is much bigger. And just whatever brush you think. Those would probably be the 2 Dixie Belle ones that might do the job really well. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to try the 1-inch. It might be a little much. But what we want to do is we want to get that paint in these cracks. There's not a lot we can do on this curved part because you want to put it places that you can't really get your rag in there to wipe it out. So we're going to try these 2 crevices there and see how that works first. And I'll do my best to bring in my camera so you can see those details as we work. All right, let's get to it. So we're going to basically mist it down. I painted the second coat of this probably about an hour ago. I'm going to wet my brush down too. You do not want a lot of paint, so I like to just load it up a little bit, and we're just going to put a line like that. Okay, and I think we'll go ahead and do the lower section too. And it might take you a couple tries to figure out how much water to mist on there, but it shouldn't take too much of a learning curve. Now here's where I'm just going to use my rag. I want you to be careful that we're not wet distressing here. So I don't want to do a lot of rubbing. This is where having your paint wet, that's why I used the misting bottle. So I can just wipe off any of that excess paint. Notice I'm not using another brush. If you watched me enough, you know I like to use what I like to call shading. And we're not shading here. I'm not softening any edges right now. I just want that paint to stay in that little section. And I can see a little bit of my paint getting in this crack. And I might wipe that off. Because the general idea, again, is you can't get your rag in there. Okay, so if I can, let me just show you what we're talking about. Do you see that gray paint in there? It looks gray, but it's a dark teal. That's what I want. That's what we want happening. Now I can still take a brush, like maybe a French tip, and just soften it, but it looks pretty good just wiping it with the rag. That's what we want to accomplish. That's one reason, again, I can't really put it on this crack here because I would just wipe it off. That's not really the ideal location for that. Let's go ahead and continue that same, so we're not going up and down too much. Let's continue that all the way around at the same height across, and I think that would be good. So just mist it, and sometimes I just put too much paint down. And once again, like I said, this may be too big of a brush, but it worked pretty well on the first one, so I'm not totally lost on that fact that I think it's too big. So you just need to move quickly, and you want to make sure you put enough water down. So if you have to mist, because if it feels dry, you did not put enough water down. And notice that I'm trying to do both at the same time because I don't want to mist over wet paint. What I mean is if I get the bottom crack done, I don't want to come back and spray over that. So even maybe be careful in there. All right, here goes our removal of paint. Being careful here. I don't want to push too hard and do any kind of wet distressing. I would recommend that you give your paint a good day to dry before you do this, just so that you make sure that you aren't going to be, let it cure a day before you do this. in an ideal situation so that you don't wipe any of your, or you start distressing your paint. So if this was, let's say I painted this in drop cloth, you might consider that this, what I'm doing right now, is almost antiquing a piece. So you could come back with maybe a darker cream, and you can see different color combinations working really well here. And that's one reason, again, why I like the Stormy Seas. So you can see I'm just wiping off. I'm not trying to make any effort to get the paint out of the cracks. That's 100% the goal here, is to keep the paint in there. So try not to be a little bit more persuasive. Try not to go back with too much of the misting bottle, just because you're going to leave spots in your paint. Okay. All right, right here, I forgot. I need to get that area there. So this is where I may have to get a little creative and just protect what I just did. I'm going to try a smaller brush this time. Sorry to get in your face there. And I think that if a smaller brush is going to allow me to not be have so much paint to remove. That creates more work when you have more paint to remove. Okay, so just getting that paint in that crevice there. Try and move my lights around. There we go. You might have, if you're working on a big project quickly, you might need more than one rag around, because after a while, you're going to build up paint in that rag. This could be, also keep in mind, this could be a light color, like you could put cotton or fluff in here and do more of like a white trim. It doesn't really matter the colors you used. I mean, it matters if you're concerned about that, but you can put any color you want in here. And you probably could even use something like a voodoo gel stain if you wanted to. Okay, I'm coming back and just doing some minor cleanup. Look for consistencies. You don't want the paint to go in and out like dark and light. You may find that there's a couple areas you just need to, you either had too much water in or you just didn't put enough paint. So just keep an eye on it. Look for consistency if that matters to you. Okay, and we're going to back the camera up, and we're going to do the last section on the other side, if my space will allow. Okay, so we're going to do this area right here. So we're going to go back to the misting bottle. Keep it wet. I might say work quickly, because that paint will start to dry, but you've got a decent amount of time. You know, I wouldn't do this and then walk away and try and come back and wipe it off. That will not work. Okay, very good. And we're just going to, if you ever get to the point that, and this wouldn't be too hard to touch up if you maybe miss some gray paint. Worst case scenario, just repaint that little area, like repaint all this gray out, and then just redo this. It wouldn't be hard. I've done this enough times that you kind of learn how much pressure and how much water, how much paint, things like that. You know what? We probably should put paint at the top. I wonder if I did that on the other side. I don't know if I did. I think I did. Just getting some paint on my brush. If not, what I would do is I would let's say I forgot the other side. I would let it all dry. And then I would come back and then do this after, because you don't want to get mist on your previous work. And I kind of, hopefully I made sense of that. So now we got both of those lines done. I could do this crack here, but I don't think we need to accentuate that. So I'm going to leave that like it is. That could be kind of interesting to try and work around that. Okay, for the next part of this, I think we're going to have to move our camera up. My camera up. So give me a second. I know it's going to be a little shaky there, but that's what happens when you're working on a china cabinet. All right. set this down. Almost done. My tripod doesn't adjust that much. All right, so this is the next area we want to work on. So that's what I was really trying to get us to. All right, now we're going to, same thing, but notice how many cracks we have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have a bunch of areas that all need to be done this way. So we're going to work. I think I'm going to bring my large brush back again because I can get more than one crack done at the same time. So here we're going to put it all in there, not putting too much paint on my brush. This might be a good place to do some of the shading we've talked about, but I'm going to stay on task of applying and wiping away. All right. Borderline too much paint again, but that's good. My rag could be a little softer. It's kind of a used old rag. So if your rag feels too abrasive, you might be cautious just so that, again, we don't want to rough up and scratch and distress this paint. Nothing wrong with distressing, don't get me wrong, but if that's not your goal, that could be a problem. So I'm constantly moving my rag around to get a fresh, so I'm just finding another spot because you don't want to put paint back on there. Light touch, gentle might be another word. And remember that the other option I could do here is come in with a brush and soften any of that. And you might even be able to use a finger to fine tune any surface. But the fact that I'm going horizontal allows me to get a nice consistent stroke, if you will. I'm going to get my other rag that doesn't have much paint on it at all. And I'm just going to make sure that there's not too much paint floating around. In my lighting, it might be a little difficult to see. In fact, I'm kind of seeing some paint get down here. So I'll have to keep an eye on that. If I have to touch that up, I will. But that's what we're looking for. If I adjust the lights a little bit, well, it's we'll come back to that. It needs to dry. Right now it's just shiny, but that's going to look great. But get it, adjust the light so you can see what you're doing. Me getting it out of the light did help see a couple things I needed to fine tune. And just clean up. Because you don't really want to touch up. Does that make sense? Touching up would not be, because then you're just painting over the work you just did. Okay, we're going to do another side here. And we're going to go back to the small brush. It was nice to try the large one, but I still felt like I put too much paint down. I don't know. I've got enough surface and areas here to paint, so I might as well just do a test and compare the two, which one was faster. But I did have to wipe a lot of paint off. That's one thing I don't want to do, spend a lot of time wiping it off. So if that's happening, it's possible your brush, you just put too much paint down. I'm feeling a little too much dry paint, which means I didn't get enough water in there. This really is a nice effect because it's not over the top. It's not, it's not like blending or a big change. You're just adding a little bit of highlight accent. Let's see if I can pull you back in here without too much glare. Hopefully everything's tech-wise is still working great. I'll probably have some people say that they missed me because they couldn't find it, but all right, you see how I'm just using my finger through the rag. And just customizing, wiping out. And here's the other thing too, is that one of the things that I'm not doing is I don't want this all the way down the side. So I'm only applying it to where the cracks are. So what's happening is, I'll just tell you up front, because there is paint on my rag, as it's hitting the side, it's putting a little paint down. So keep an eye on that. It's one reason I'm trying to use just the tip of my finger, but I need to hold it off the project. There we go. That looked a little bit better. So yeah, a little less work than the other side because I use less paint. And I'm going to use, my finger seems to doing a great job of wiping it off. Gentle touch. Okay. Now I will tell you that the way I do my lights in my studio, I might see this later on and go, oh, botched that. But if I had to put a little extra paint in there and redo it, it's not a lot of work. Let's take a look at the bottom again. So there's that section we did. It seems really far on my camera, but that's really popping well. So that's working nicely. You can see the corner. It's just really making that pop quite well. For the sake of time, let's do the section around here. I think that'll be a nice, we know how the top will work, all this area up at the top, we know how that'll work. So I'd like to keep demonstrating different sections. I think that'd be good. So back to misting again. And I just misted down below, but I think it's dry enough that that shouldn't be too much of a problem. But we'll find out, won't we? Like I said, if you mist over wet chalk paint, you're going to bring add dots. That's the only disadvantage. So you might have to be strategic on where you paint and where you don't paint. Does that make sense? Like you might say, well, let's put a fan on it for 10 minutes and let me let it dry before we spray over an area that I just worked on. This is kind of getting a little meticulous now because I've got to put in just the right spot. And unfortunately, I don't have a camera that follows me around. So I'll keep forgetting about you guys. I'm sorry. That is the whole point, right? Just to bring you guys along the process. All right. How much paint? Totally up to you. But I will tell you, the drier it is, very possible the more paint you're going to put down compared to if it was really wet and it's slick. All right. That's a large, I will say that that's somewhat of a larger area. So you might need to remist before you wipe off. Our goal is to leave that paint only in the corner of this detail. Okay, so move that rag around. Like I said, I don't know if I really have a name for this technique. It's not shading because we're not really, shading is what I'll do with almost, again, comparing it to like wax, putting wax on there and then softening the edge. Here I'm just adding paint in the details. So if you guys have a name you've heard of, I'm all ears, but antiquing might be the closest thing I have. But usually antiquing, you're putting paint or wax anywhere you feel like hasn't been able to be cleaned for years, kind of thing. So yeah. Feel free to put your thoughts in the comments if you have an idea there. All right. And again, I'll have to go back and edit this video just because my camera is not going with me. But I think you get the idea as I walk through that. I needed to put more paint down here. I didn't feel like I put enough. But one of the places you're looking for paint to, you don't want paint on the flat areas. Does that make sense? So this flat, sometimes I'll go back and just clean that back up and make sure that there's no paint on the flat side. Just a nice courtesy wipe, if you will. Good. Just doing a last check here all the way up and down. All right, I think that'll work. So right here, we got to figure that out. But here's the deal. Like I said, if I spray up here, some of the spray might get on the work I did below. So it'd probably be good to save the top for last, let everything below it dry. I think that would be really good. And I think what I'm going to do on this one, since I was so close, I'm going to keep you guys further back and quickly do this last panel here. Adjust my camera just so. And we'll just do this last panel with this technique. And I think we can call this demonstrated well. Back to our 1 inch, I don't know, I guess that's maybe a 1/2 inch. Not sure what size we call this brush and if my camera will even. Want to even, there we go. I was wondering if it's going to focus, but yeah. If you wanted to err, I would say err on the side of not putting enough paint. And as soon as you paint, you'll know pretty quick when you start brushing if it feels dry, like the brush is just grabbing the paint. Then you know it's not wet enough. That's when you'd want to mist again. And you can always do one strip at a time. I'm doing the whole panel only because I know I could probably work fast enough to do that. And I'm not doing too much paint that I can get really far anyway. Maybe a 1/2 foot at a time or a foot at a time. And after that, you're probably going to need to reload your brush anyway. Like I said, I moved y'all back a little bit on the camera just so that you can see the whole thing. Okay. Back to our rag again. Surface is still wet. This really is easy to do way to make some areas of your piece pop. You want the details to stand out more. And I kind of wish I had the front cabinets done because that's another interesting place. Maybe we'll figure out a way. I don't know. I don't want to overpromise that I'll be able to do a live or anything, but maybe I can record it. We'll see. But with over 100 videos on YouTube, you probably have seen me problem solve and do something like this more than once if you followed enough. This really is not a lot between this and shading. I mean, with shading, I'm still misting. But normally shading, I'm not wiping anything off. I'm blending it in. I'm softening it into the piece. All right, so just still wiping paint off. And look for inconsistencies, like areas that are really dark, areas that are really thin. And I'm going back to almost like my fresh rag once in a while just to do a final cleanup because there's so much brown or stormy season. Sometimes you just don't. You think you got it clean, but you're just wiping more paint around. I can see it's a little darker in here, so I'm going to try and move some of the paint. A little too much paint in there. So I'm going to go back in there and clean that up. Looks better. You can't really inspect it too much or I wish I looked at that later. Now you got to touch it up. So get all your inspection done now. Maybe even come back to the original spot. And as it dries, you'll start seeing things. Oh man, need to work on that. But I think that's pretty good. Okay. I think that's enough for that technique. I think you get the idea. If you have any questions, by all means, put that in the comments. today or in the future, and that'd be perfectly fine. I think what I'd like to do now is take a little time, and pardon me again as I bring you guys down on this tripod. I'd like to go ahead and take a little time and paint and work on the base, and just illustrate a little bit about just basic painting. Some things that I work on, especially as I'm working around things like cabinet doors and things like that. So that's what we're going to work on. Close up this Stormy Seas paint. It's seen a lot of projects because it's a popular color for me, especially for the techniques I just did. I'm going to throw my brushes in the bucket of water. I like to keep that handy. And if you're new to chalk painting, maybe this next step will help a little bit. The inside, the top inside does need to be given a second coat. The outside already had 2 coats, so I'll paint that later. But let's take on the challenge of working around the bottom. Hopefully my camera does good. It doesn't cut out or anything. And you guys can see well. Might even bring this down a little bit. So I'm transitioning to the bottom, so little moving parts here and all that. All right, hope you're doing well. And thank you again so much for tuning in. All right, my vintage duck egg, probably my top 5 color for sure. And I'm always, this bottle is, misting bottle is my best friend when I'm painting. I'm going to get a Dixie Belle Mini, probably my #1 brush in my studio as well. It just covers a large surface, and you take care of it, it will take care of you. So first thing I'm going to do is give this just a good mist, because I would like the paint to go on smoothly, and a smooth finish usually comes with a smooth surface. Now, the other option you can do is you could also take your paint and mix a little bit of water into it, maybe put a little bit into a separate container, and loosen it up, because sometimes the paint's thick. And I say thick, thicker than I always like it, especially paint out of an older container tends to not be as smooth. So if you don't want to add water, mix and smooth it out a little bit, then you need a misting bottle. So make sure you have one handy. And so like, for example, if I'm going to use a sprayer, I usually have to thin down the paint. It's just too thick. You know, you can see it. It's not, you know, it just needs a little help. And so adding the mist allows it to be smoother. And you know you're going to do 2 coats anyway, so might as well keep them thin coats as opposed to thick coats. You get a lot of people ask, how can I remove brush strokes? Well, probably the #1 culprit for brush strokes is the paint's too thick. #2 would probably be the types of brush you're using is not quality. These are first-class brushes, and I use them for painting houses or other things. I mean, you can't get much better than that. So if you haven't invested in good brushes and you're planning on doing a lot of painting, I definitely would recommend that you get good brushes. It's just the bristle count, bristle size, all those things. It's denser, nicer. So notice again, I only misted 1 time, but I put enough paint on there, water on there, that I didn't have to keep misting. This is a fairly new container of chalk mineral paint, or of vintage duck egg, so that helps. But if this had been sitting around a while, it might be a little thicker than this is. And you just never know with the paint you're using how thick it's going to be, and the misting bottle really does help. I'm not saying it's required. I'm just going to tell you it's going to be a smoother, easier time to paint. And so I would recommend you do that. If you missed my prep on this project, I just posted it on YouTube. this morning. So you can go back and watch that process right after you get done watching this. I'll try and link it when I get this on YouTube. I'll try and link to that video where I talked about tools and different things for this project. Notice that I did a quick mist. It doesn't have to be precise, just get some extra. Since you're not mixing into your paint, misting your piece will help. Speaking of prep, oftentimes what I will do, I'll put my boss on here, my primer, and then I will tape off on the inside to get a nice clean finish. I didn't do that yet, so probably before I do my second coat of paint, I'll open this cabinet up and I'll put a nice clean tape line so that I have a nice clean painted area. And what I mean by that is this line down here is a little brushy right now. So I can put some tape in there and clean that up. Since we have this open, I'll go ahead and put some paint on this edge. I really do want a nice clean result, clean product, and having the tape. Now I could have taped off before, but sometimes you don't know how far the paint's going to go. So if you want to know, do a coat of your boss and you'll know where you need to tape off. So now I know exactly how far the paint can get. I'll put some tape down, clean it up, and we'll be good to go. Okay. So I've mentioned this before. Put one more quick mist there. It doesn't really matter which direction you put the paint on. But when you're done, this is where it matters, is that you smooth it out. So get the paint on there. Of course, it's fine to do it in the right direction the first time, but sometimes you just can't get it. It's the last thing you do when you touch it that really matters. So light touch, just give it a nice smooth. That'll be a great way to make sure that it does its self-leveling or whatnot. It's smooth. So that's a great way to help you if you're new to painting, how to get a nice smooth finish. Okay, just mist one area at a time because the paint's going to start soaking up that mist anyway, so it doesn't do any good to mist an area and then expect it to be wet 5 minutes from now. All right, so we're still working. There's some areas underneath I need to get. I will need to do 2 coats of this. I pretty much always do 2 coats. One, because I know the first one's going to have some areas I missed, but I also like to work a little thinner to make sure it's nice and smooth. So as you can see right now, I'm going different directions. I'm all over the place. I'm almost more what I would consider just getting paint down. And then I'm going to come back and smooth it out. Now this is a drawer. So I'm going to pull this out. And then I'm not painting the sides. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It depends on how tight the drawers are in the space they're in. Okay, so smooth that out and notice I'm going to but I'm not going to push it all the way back in. I'm going to leave it about right there. I don't want it to dry sealed, if you will. Okay. Now the interesting thing about this bottom section, it's actually a cabinet door. And so I didn't know that was like that until I started working on it, but that's pretty cool. So you've got 3 cabinet spaces for the price of 2. Now, if you watched my live about the prep on this, there was some sanding I needed to do to get these drawers from not sticking, doors from not sticking. So I did that off camera, and so we have it has some areas that I may need to address, but that's all part of the process. Just getting everything smooth and working out. Sometimes you create an issue because when you paint underneath or on top of something, like under the lip, you may have to sand after you're done painting. Just because paint, you scrape it on there and it goes on thick. There's all kinds of reasons. So before I'm done, I'm going to make sure everything's as much as possible smooth, sliding smooth. I don't do all that finished work before I paint. Vintage duck egg is a great color. I would consider it to be somewhat, although the word vintage is in the name, I think it's somewhat timeless. It's just a little bit of extra teal and a touch of gray. So it's all good. How are we doing on time? All right, got about 10 minutes to go. Always, if you have questions, you're welcome to message me here on YouTube. And maybe I didn't explain something effectively or maybe it wasn't clear, but I'm always happy to help. Especially when it comes to Dixie Belle products. As a content creator for Dixie Belle, I've been doing it a little while. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clean that up there. You can see how quick I'm moving. Project like this, about the only way to get it done in a decent amount of time is to move quickly. But after you painted a few pieces, you kind of get to that point where you can do that. Just use the principles of keep your surface somewhat wet so you can move the paint quickly, keep it thin, and then also smooth it out. I'm not sure why it's hanging like that. It might be missing something on the inside to keep it still, but I'll check that out. I am painting the hardware. Oftentimes what I will do is I'll do, because it's going to start wearing off from a standpoint of open and closing it. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll sand that down. And then oftentimes I will put a coat of gilding wax on it and just shine it up a little bit. That's usually a nice touch too. All right. Okay, so that should give you a general idea of how that all works out. Let's see if I can move this around. There's a lot of moving parts here. I hate to leave us hanging and not finish the other side. I really need it done anyway, right? There we go. Last side, and then we'll finish up. So last opportunity to catch me live, at least tonight. Outside of that, you just have to holler at me off camera. You're not on camera, but I'm on camera. Just showing you a little bit of how I go about this. I'm not working any faster and slower than I normally am, so this is pretty much active work. So you see how I went side to side? You don't want that to dry that way, so make sure you go vertical with that before it starts setting in, or you'll have a horizontal line you'll regret. Like down here, I'll oftentimes do this part side to side because it doesn't really matter, but what matters is how you finish it out, and we'll just smooth it all out. That's how I handle that. And again, nice finishing stroke. Now the bonding boss and vintage duck egg are very close in value, so it does give me a little bit of extra challenge to make sure I don't miss a spot. But sometimes you may have to get some daylight on your piece before to check that for sure. But trust me, I will find some stuff all the way almost to the time I need to top coat it. So, all right, I think we're done with that. I just need to do all the steps. I still have the cabinet door to do with the trim shading. Paint the inside, so got a lot of steps. It's going to take me a week or so to get it all done, but so step by step. My advice with any big project is every day do another step. Before you know it, in a week or so, you'll have it done. And you can have other projects moving at the same time. I've got one that I'm working on, just an old box. So always have multiple things going so that as things are drying, you can move on to the next step on another project. And it's kind of fun that way to see these things. And what's really fun is when you get them done, you go, wow, I just started that thing. So anyways, I'm glad you came along this journey. And be sure to check out the prep part of this video. I'll try and put that into the end of this one so you know which one to click on. But I'm Aaron here in the Bowtie Treasures studio. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night and do something awesome and creative while you're at it. Until next time, we'll see you later.